In this clip number 4, I'm going to look at the key processes, the 4 key processes of motivational interviewing, and then I'm going to spend some time looking at the 5 core skills. The audio, I'm guessing, is going to be about 10-15 minutes, and this is on page 11 in your booklets. So if you want to make some notes as I go through the description, then please feel free to. So we'll start with the processes. The 3rd edition of motivational interviewing kind of streamlined MI, I guess, and put the whole approach under these 4 headings: engaging, focusing, evoking, and planning. The first 2 editions of motivational interviewing didn't structure it in this way, and I think it's a really helpful way of looking at the approach, putting things under these 4 headings. So I'm going to go through each one in turn with a little bit of information, and then when we come back to the on-screen time, we will look at all of these through the rest of the training day. A lot of these are really obvious by their title. If we start with engaging, all of us engage with people in our work. You're either engaging on the phone, or you're engaging virtually on Zoom or WhatsApp or team meetings, or you're engaging face to face. You might be engaging with older people, younger people, staff members, and I think the process is pretty much always involving the same thing, which is you are creating a safe space to talk. You're either doing that on the phone, you're doing that face to face, it's the same. You're creating this environment that is trusting and safe for somebody to talk to you. We can use some of the core skills to do this. So we're going to move on to core skills later, but the open questions, affirmations, reflections, summaries, these are all key skills that can form part of the engaging process. What we want to try and do is avoid some of the traps that we can fall into at the start of our relationship with people, where maybe we jump in to advise, or we're very quick to be the expert, or we're quick to analyse or categorise, or get into blaming sometimes. Engaging should be about really setting up a mutual trust between you so that the relationship can build. Engaging comes first. Unless we have an engaged connection with somebody, we wouldn't want to move on to the other processes. Focusing is a chance to look at what the aspiration or the goal of the work together is going to be. Again, this can be with staff, it can be with service users and clients, but what are you working towards? What are the goals? What are the aspirations? Hopefully these are going to be shared. Sometimes they're different, but it's really useful to have a clear aim for the work. And I think this is a real key part to the motivational interviewing approach. There are 2 skills that we're going to look at on this training. One of them is agenda setting or agenda mapping. This is where you're kind of looking at what the person wants to talk about, you're sharing what you're there to talk about, and then you're looking at the order that runs in. Where possible, it's really useful to do this in a collaborative way. So you're working in partnership with somebody, you're looking at what you want to talk about, you're looking at what they want to talk about, and if possible, you're encouraging them to come up with the order in which you do that. And we'll look at agenda setting in more detail later on in the training. We also might need to share information, we might need to give advice, and one of the skills we're going to look at under focusing is how we do this. And Miller and Rolnick talk about elicit, provide, elicit. I tend to say ask, provide, ask. So it's a case of how do we give information or advice when we're working with people, and there is a real kind of structure that we can follow to make sure we're doing that in a partnership way rather than being in the expert role. Evoking is where we start to talk about being the owl. So we talked about the owl in the tree listening for the mice. Motivational interviewing practitioner is listening to what somebody is saying and they're drawing out change talk. Sometimes it's already there in the dialogue. Sometimes we're using these evoking skills to draw the change talk out. There's a number of stages to this. We need to be able to recognise change talk. We've already talked about the darn cat analogy. So change talk is desire, I want, ability, I can, reason, this is why I want to do it, need, I've got to. And we call these the preparing statements, the preparatory statements of change. As people become more inclined towards action, we might hear some CAT statements: commitment, activation, taking steps. This is I will. Here's my decision, and I've tried a few things already. So we need to recognise change talk, and we need to have the skills to evoke change talk. And there are a number of skills that we can use that we will be looking at later. And not only that, we need to recognise change talk, evoke change talk, and we need to know how to respond to it. And that's where the core skills come in again. So affirmation, reflection, summarising. So we need to know how to respond to change talk, and we'll talk about that later. The planning process is where we need to notice where somebody is giving off signs that they're ready to move into planning. We want to help people to come up with realistic steps, and we want to help them to kind of strengthen their commitment for change and kind of elicit that commitment from the people that we work with. So the whole of this motivation interviewing approach comes into 4 key processes. Engaging, so establishing the relationship. We need to do that first and foremost. Focusing, so looking at what's going to be talked about and really establishing a kind of aim or goal for the work. Evoking, tuning into change talk, drawing change talk out, responding effectively to that change talk. And planning, when the time is right, looking for the signs of moving into planning and helping people to come up with realistic aims and helping to strengthen their commitment with those aims. Those are the 4 processes. We can also look at 5 core skills that form part of all of those processes. So they kind of weave their way through the whole of the approach. So we can use the acronym OARS, which are open questions, affirmation, reflective listening, summarising. And we've also got information and giving advice, which I've already mentioned. Let's have a little look at the other 4 skills. So open questions, I imagine you're familiar with open questions. I think it's useful to try and avoid closed questions, or certainly to avoid using them all the time. So I'm sure you know this already. A closed question gives you a yes or no or a 1 or 2. It really kind of closes down the dialogue and gets you very simple answers. Open questions are used to expand the dialogue, to really open up the conversation. And it's really thinking about the words we use to do this. So why isn't a great start to a question. It can kind of, sometimes it can have a bit of judgment in it. Sometimes it can lead people to feel like they've got to analyse why they do what they do. Some of the kind of open questions that I use a lot are: talk me through a typical day, or tell me more about your relationship, tell me more about your self-care, tell me more about your relationship, talk me through a typical day of your drinking. These are soft, open questions to kind of increase the chat and explore different areas. We want to try and avoid leading questions. And we want to try and avoid complicated questions. So sometimes we can get quite complex, Almost like that interview question that you get where somebody asks you pretty much 3 questions in one, and by the time they get to the end of the question you can't really remember what it is that they were asking. So short, straightforward, open questions can be really effective in dialogues. Affirmation is a really important skill. We want to help people to believe that they can change. We want to, the terminology would be, we want to support self-efficacy. We want to build people's self-belief that they can do something about their situation. And we're not just passive in that. We're not just going to sit by while somebody doesn't really believe in themselves. We want to actively promote somebody's self-worth. So we want to look for things that we can affirm. Their values, their beliefs, their qualities, their ways of being. We want to give affirmations. Now this sounds really strange, but I often think about pigeons. So sometimes when you see pigeons strutting around, you'll see them kind of puff up their chests and kind of lift up. When I'm working with people who have low self-worth, low self-esteem or low self-belief, I really want to try and come up with some great affirmations that enable them to lift up. I want to see that pigeon response, as crazy as that sounds. I want to see a lift in the body language, and that would be one of my aims when I'm working with people, is I'm looking for that response. We can see this in virtual land as well. We can hear it on the phone. You can hear somebody lift. Some of the people that we've worked with have never received positive affirmation. And so it can feel quite uncomfortable sometimes when we start giving affirmations. You're thoughtful, you're kind, you've thought about this a lot, you're honest. Sometimes people can bat that away and feel it is a bit uncomfortable. So I think we need to look at how we phrase things and look at how we put the affirmation into our dialogue, but it's a crucial skill. And it often leads to change talk, and it can often lead to people feeling more able to make changes. It can be useful to start affirmation with the word you. So you're not offering somebody your opinion. You're not saying, I think you're saying you are. So if somebody was to say to me that they had, I don't know, if I'm working with a young person, and they were to say, I'm really worried about my mum, I might say, you really care about your mum's feelings. It's not an opinion. I'm not saying, I think you care. I'm saying, you care. Or I might say, you're the type of person who really cares about other people. So the word you is quite powerful in affirming people. I think it's different to a compliment. A compliment is kind of nice hair, nice shoes. And I'm not saying there isn't a place for compliments, but affirmation is deeper. It's about the person. It can also be about the process. So I might affirm somebody because they're engaging with me. You've shared a lot with me today. You've shared some really painful memories with me today. You've been really open. You've been really honest with me. You've managed to stay for the whole session. You've turned up. So sometimes it's about affirming the process. Affirmation, key skill. Reflective listening, we're going to talk about on the screen, and we're going to do some exercises on reflection. It's an important skill. It's the way that we show empathic listening. It's the way we show empathy. So reflection is something that we're going to look at in the group on the screen. Summarising, there are a number of different ways of summarising, but we're kind of collecting together some of the key points that people have said. If there's change talk, we're collecting together that change talk, and then we're going to give a summary. We can use summaries to move from one kind of topic to another. We can use summaries when we've spoken to somebody previously to get the conversation started again. So there's a number of different ways of linking information together by using a summary. And I think the key thing is to keep it short. Some people like to start with so to summarise. Personally, I think that can sound a little bit like the end of an essay. So I'm more likely to say, the main things you seem to have said today are. So I would tend to do it more informally. Some people like to check out. Is there anything you'd like to add to that? Or have I got that right at the end of the summary? I tend to just let them sit. So I will offer my summary with the kind of belief that people will add to it if I've missed something. But if I'm working with somebody where I don't think they would be inclined to do that, then I might check out. Is there anything there that I've missed or that you'd like to add to? Informing and advising, we're going to talk about on the screen. So just to bring this together, there are 4 key processes in motivation interviewing: engaging, focusing, evoking and planning. And the 5 core skills that weave their way through these processes are open questions, affirmation, reflective listening, summarising and providing information, or exchanging information and providing advice. Thank you.